Avery Blake was 7 months pregnant when a white cop kicked her in the stomach on a public sidewalk in broad daylight. She posed no threat. She begged him to stop. He did it anyway. And while she bled on the pavement, the system stayed silent. But her husband Isaiah, a former Marine, refused to stay quiet. He didn't just want justice. He wanted to break the silence that protects men like that cop. What happens when a black family stands up against a system designed to crush them? Like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a reckoning. It was just after 5:30 p.m. on a breezy spring afternoon in Southside Chicago. The wind smelled faintly of gasoline and blooming trees. The sidewalk, cracked and uneven, was full of after-work chatter children playing tag and old men arguing about sports outside a barber shop. Avery Blake, 32, was walking carefully, each step calculated. 7 months pregnant, she moved with that graceful caution only expecting mothers knew. One hand balanced a bag of groceries, the other stayed cradled under her belly. She had just left the corner store, humming softly to herself, already picturing her husband Isaiah setting the table at home. She was less than a block away when a police cruiser pulled up. The tires screeched slightly as it mounted the curb. Then came the bark. "Hey, you there! Stop!" Avery paused, turned slowly. A white officer stepped out, tall, broad, mid-40s. His name tag read Huxley. His eyes didn't look curious or alert. They looked annoyed, like she was interrupting something. She answered softly. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Where's your ID?" he snapped, already approaching. Avery blinked. "It's in my purse. I live right here on 89th. I said don't move." Her body froze, her voice lowered. "Please, I'm pregnant." The grocery bag slipped from her fingers. Apples rolled into the street. Across the road, a little boy, Elijah, just 8 years old, stood holding his mother's phone. His mom whispered, "Don't." But Elijah had already hit record. "They always say it didn't happen," he murmured. Avery took a single step back. "That's all." And Officer Huxley snapped. Without a word, without hesitation, he lunged and kicked her hard directly in the belly. The sound was sickening. A thud followed by Avery's sharp scream as she collapsed onto the pavement, curling inward, both arms wrapped around her womb. Her breath caught in her throat. The entire block went silent. A woman across the street screamed. Someone dropped their coffee. Elijah's small hand shook, but he didn't stop filming. Huxley didn't flinch. He stood over Avery for a beat, breathing heavy like he'd done something righteous. Then he turned, walked back to his cruiser, and drove off. No badge number given, no backup called, no second glance. Avery lay trembling on the sidewalk. Her dress darkened with blood. Her lips were pale, her eyes glassy. I can't feel him," she whispered. "My baby, please." Neighbors rushed in. A middle-aged woman knelt beside her, dialing 911 with shaking hands. "We need an ambulance now." "She's pregnant." He kicked her. Avery's breathing turned shallow. "Tell Isaiah I didn't do anything," she murmured, voice barely audible. Elijah's mom tried to shield his eyes. "Come on, baby, let's go." But Elijah stood his ground, whispering, "No, she needs someone to see." Sirens wailed in the distance. When paramedics arrived, it was chaos. They worked fast, lifting Avery gently, strapping monitors to her belly, pushing oxygen into her lungs. "Stay with us, ma'am," one EMT said firmly. "I think we're losing the baby," another whispered. Avery's head rolled to the side. "Tell him I was just walking," she said, tears spilling from her eyes. As they loaded her into the ambulance, the blood was still pooling where she fell. Elijah held his phone tight, his voice small but steady. "I got it all, every second." The woman beside him whispered, "God help us." By 6:00 p.m., that sidewalk wasn't just a crime scene, it was ground zero. Avery Blake didn't resist. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She said 5 words, "Please, I'm just going home." But to Wade Huxley, that was enough. Enough to dehumanize her. Enough to use force. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know who her husband was. And he sure as hell didn't know that 3 different people, 3 different angles had captured the whole thing. But he would find out, because that single vicious kick was about to blow the lid off everything. The ER doors slammed open just as Isaiah Blake stepped through them. He didn't remember parking. He didn't remember locking the car. All he remembered was the voice on the other end of the phone. Your wife, she's in surgery. There was an assault. She's losing blood. His boots hit the tile floor like war drums. Former Marine. 2 tours. Desert storms and concrete hell. He'd faced mortars and snipers and things that had no name, but nothing prepared him for the sight of Avery lying in that hospital bed. Her skin was pale. Her lips cracked. Her hands clenched tight even in unconsciousness, and the monitor beside her measuring 2 heartbeats kept screaming and stalling, screaming and stalling. Flat spikes. Erratic pulses. Then the silence that made his own heart stop. A nurse moved to explain, but Isaiah raised a hand gently. Just give me a minute. He stepped closer. Stared down at the woman he'd promised to grow old with. Her belly now wrapped in gauze bruises peeking through the hospital gown like cruel reminders of what had been done. He didn't cry. He didn't punch walls. He just stood there still as stone. His thoughts began to flicker. Back to that tiny apartment 5 years ago. The night Avery curled into him and whispered, "It's gone, love." The heartbeat stopped. They had lost their first child before it had a name. The grief had been slow, heavy quiet, like drowning in fog. Now here they were again, and this time he saw the enemy. Avery stirred. Her eyes opened cloudy with pain. Her voice came out weak, barely more than breath. "He knew Isaiah," she whispered. "He looked me in the eyes. He saw, and he still kicked me." Isaiah's jaw tensed. "He didn't care," she said. "He wanted to hurt me. He didn't even shout. Just did it." She tried to shift, but winced. Tears slid down her cheeks. I felt the baby stop moving. Isaiah reached for her hand, held it gently. But still, he said nothing. Because the war inside him had already begun. Outside the hospital room, the hallway buzzed phones, nurses, footsteps. Isaiah walked calmly into the waiting room, pulled out his phone, and opened the video Elijah's mother had sent him. He had watched it once already in the car. Now he watched it again. The footage wasn't shaky. The audio was clear. It captured everything to stop the voice Avery saying, "I'm pregnant." And then the kick. He didn't blink. He didn't rewind. He just breathed. Then he opened his messages and tapped a name, Marcus Lowell. Marcus had been his brother-in-arms in Fallujah. Now he was one of the sharpest civil rights attorneys in Illinois. Isaiah typed 4 words. "I need your help." A minute later, a reply lit up the screen. "Tell me where and when." Back inside, Avery had drifted back to sleep. Isaiah sat beside her, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, both hands clasped together. He whispered, "I don't want revenge. I want truth. I want accountability." He looked at her swollen face. "I won't let this disappear, Eve. Not this time. Not like the others." Because he knew what happened to women like her, black, soft-spoken, not the right victim. The news cycle forgot them. The badge silenced them. The system erased them. But Isaiah didn't forget, and he never flinched. He stood, kissed his wife's forehead, and walked out the door with the kind of calm that made people nervous. Because silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. At first, the video spread like wildfire. By dawn the next morning, it had hit 1 million views. By lunch, it was over 3. Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all filled with the same gut-wrenching footage, Avery Blake, a pregnant woman standing quietly. Then the brutal kick. And then the silence that followed. People were furious. The comments were pouring in faster than anyone could read. He knew. She said she was pregnant. How is this not murder? Evening news anchors hesitated. The story was already too big to ignore, but too dangerous to dive into. Some stations blurred Avery's face. Others refused to show the clip at all. And by the next morning, just like that, the video vanished from every major platform. Links started breaking. Reposts got flagged. Users who shared it got temporary bans. Isaiah tried to upload it again from his phone 3 times. Each time it was blocked. Community standards. Sensitive content. Graphic violence. He paced the hospital waiting room like a soldier in a war zone, fists clenched. "Don't tell me it's the algorithm," he muttered. Marcus sat across from him, tie-loosened sleeves rolled up. "It's not." Isaiah turned. "Then what?" Marcus pulled up a private case file from years ago. This happened before. Same district. Young man beaten unarmed, caught on camera. Went viral. Within hours, the footage was pulled and the department claimed it was edited. Case died in silence. Isaiah's voice dropped low. Someone's protecting him. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't need to. He simply nodded. It's coordinated. Someone with power wants this gone. Isaiah pulled out his phone again, opened the video one more time. This time, he didn't just watch Avery. He watched Huxley, frame by frame, right before the kick, just a flicker. Huxley's cold blue eyes glanced directly at the phone Elijah was holding across the street. He saw it. He knew he was being filmed, and he did it anyway. Isaiah paused the screen and handed it to Marcus. That's not a man losing control. That's someone who believes he's untouchable. Marcus looked closer, then leaned back in his seat, exhaling through his nose. We need the press. The kind that doesn't flinch. Isaiah smirked. You thinking what I'm thinking? That night they met him in a coffee shop near the train tracks. Cheap lights, plastic chairs, and a humming AC unit. Dante Hill, young, sharp, and tired in the eyes. He had once been the golden boy of local journalism, until he wrote one story too many about police corruption. Lost his job. Lost his press badge. But not his voice. Dante slid into the booth and gave Isaiah a slow nod. You look exactly how I imagined. Former Marine. Stoic. Quiet fire. Isaiah raised an eyebrow. And you're still alive. Dante smiled just a little, barely. Marcus pushed the phone across the table. We need eyes on this, not the kind that blink. Dante tapped play. The video ran again. He didn't blink once. When it ended, he looked up. You know what's wild? Isaiah said nothing. Dante continued. He sees the camera. He knows he's on film. And he still kicks her. Isaiah nodded once. That's not a mistake, that's confidence. Dante leaned forward. That's protection. That's a man who's done this before and got away with it. Probably more than once, Marcus added. You cover this. Your name goes back on a blacklist. You sure you're ready for that? Dante chuckled. You think I haven't already been there? He tapped the table twice like sealing a deal. Send me everything. I'll write it up. No filters. No spin. Isaiah looked at him hard. Don't write it like a story. Write it like a warning. Within 12 hours, Dante's article went live on an underground platform. The headline was simple. He knew she was pregnant. The article broke it all down: the angle, the eye contact, the cover-up, the silence. And for the first time, the story wasn't just about one woman on a sidewalk. It was about a system that gave certain men a green light to destroy lives and delete the evidence afterward. Isaiah read it twice, then closed his eyes, not out of relief, but preparation, because this wasn't going away quietly anymore. And Huxley's confidence was about to be tested. By nightfall, the steps outside Mercy West Hospital had turned into something sacred. Dozens of candles flickered along the sidewalk, their soft glow pushing back against the cold Chicago air. Handwritten signs leaned against lampposts and curbs. Justice for Avery Black Mothers Matter, we saw it too. Some held hands. Some cried quietly. And some just stood there silent, watching the doors of the emergency ward like they expected the building itself to apologize. Avery's name was no longer just a name. It had become a whisper that moved through the city like wind through leaves. And even those who hadn't seen the video, somehow they felt it. Isaiah stood behind the glass, watching it all. He hadn't stepped outside, not yet. But he saw the nurse who brought coffee to the older man with a walker. He saw the teenage boy holding up his cracked phone screen, still glowing with the last frame of Avery on the ground. And then, Elijah. The boy was back standing at the edge of the crowd, gripping his mother's coat tightly with one hand and a small video camera in the other. A local journalist had given it to him that afternoon. A volunteer handed Elijah the mic. He hesitated, eyes darting between the camera and the crowd. Then in a voice that cracked halfway through, he said, he didn't look scared. He looked used to it, like it was normal to hurt someone like her. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Inside the hospital, Isaiah felt something shift in his chest. He turned as a nurse approached him gently. She looked no older than 22. Her name tag read, Cassidy R.N. She leaned in, voice low. That officer's name? Wade Huxley. Isaiah nodded. He's not new. I've seen that name too many times in too many ER reports. People don't talk, but the nurses remember. Isaiah's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. He simply whispered, "Thank you," and she slipped away as quietly as she'd come. His phone buzzed again. A message from a number he didn't know. He did it to me in 2017. I never spoke up. I was afraid no one would care. Grace Lynn. Isaiah stared at the name for a moment. Then he typed back, I care. Would you be willing to talk to someone you're not alone anymore? She responded instantly. Yes. Marcus arrived an hour later, coat soaked in city mist. He walked straight into the waiting area with the intensity of a man who didn't come to check in, he came to fight. How's Avery? He asked, voice low. Stable. Still resting, Isaiah replied. Baby's holding on too. Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Then he looked at the crowd outside and nodded slowly. This isn't noise, he said, it's a signal. You feel it, right? Isaiah turned his eyes back toward the sidewalk. People had started drawing with chalk, now small hearts, baby footprints, her name in cursive. Yeah, Isaiah said. But we can't just react. We have to build something. If we let it burn out now, they'll bury her again. Just like they did the others. Marcus pulled out his tablet. Then let's get to work. They opened a folder, Wade Huxley's name on top. But this wasn't just about one man anymore. From across the room, Elijah watched them. His mother whispered something in his ear, but Elijah didn't hear. His eyes were locked on Isaiah. He'd never seen a man who looked that calm and that powerful at the same time. A reporter nudged closer, asking softly if she could interview him. Elijah shook his head. Not yet, he said. I still got more to film. And outside, the wind picked up just enough to blow one of the chalk-drawn hearts halfway down the street, like the city itself had started to carry Avery's name forward. The elevator ride to the mayor's office was silent. Too silent. Isaiah stood between Marcus and a security guard with a badge too polished and a face too blank. The farther they rose, the more the city below seemed like a memory. When the doors opened, a staffer in pearls and tight smiles ushered them into a conference room that looked like it hadn't seen justice in decades. Only polished wood, old coffee, and rehearsed apologies. Mayor Amanda Harper was already seated. She looked tired, or maybe just indifferent. Her blazer was perfect, and her voice even more so. Mr. Blake, first let me say how deeply sorry we are for what your family is going through. We're currently looking into the incident and awaiting full departmental review. Isaiah didn't sit. You're not looking, he said, voice steady. You're waiting for the noise to die down, for the cameras to leave, for the candles to burn out. The room shifted. Mayor Harper blinked. That's not fair. Marcus stepped in, opening a thick black folder. We didn't come here for fairness. We came with facts. Wade Huxley's internal files over a dozen misconduct allegations. None went public. 8 were resolved internally. 3 victims didn't press charges after being approached by city representatives. And you signed off on every departmental review. The mayor's assistant, a pale man with darting eyes, opened his mouth to speak, but Isaiah raised a hand. Don't, he said. Don't pretend this is new to you. The silence that followed was loud enough to rattle glass. Finally, the mayor folded her hands. What exactly do you want? Isaiah glanced at Marcus, then back at her. Accountability. Not a statement. Not a settlement. I want Wade Huxley in a courtroom. I want this city to answer for what it allowed. Harper exhaled, slow and deliberate. This city has processes. Your processes protect men like him, Isaiah cut in. Not women like my wife, not babies who haven't even had a name yet. For a moment, the mayor's face softened, but only for a moment. We're open to mediation, she offered. There's room for a confidential resolution, for healing. Isaiah didn't even flinch. No. She tilted her head. Excuse me. No settlements, no silence. If you try to hide this behind legal curtains, I'll drag them down one by one. Marcus nodded, already pulling out his phone. Then we go to court, he said. But we won't be walking in alone. Later that day, back at the hospital, Rosa Clay arrived. Her cane clicked softly against the tile as she stepped into the room. Every legal mind in the city knew her name. Some feared it. Some owed her careers. All respected her. She looked at Isaiah for a long moment before she spoke. Your name travels fast, Marine, she said. Faster when truth's on your side. Isaiah stood, extended his hand. I didn't think you'd come. She smiled. You didn't ask. But the people did. Rosa sat, pulled out a notepad, and without hesitation said, Let's go loud. Marcus leaned in. They'll come after us, hard. Good, Rosa replied. Let them swing first. We'll make sure the cameras are rolling when they miss. Isaiah looked at them both. his friend and this battle-worn warrior of the law, and felt for the first time since the sidewalk like maybe they weren't alone in this storm. And just before Rosa left, she turned to him again. "You picked the hard road, son. But the hard road is the one worth walking, especially when everyone else is too afraid to take a step." Isaiah didn't respond with words. He just nodded. Outside, the courthouse loomed in the distance like a sleeping giant. And this time, Isaiah wasn't planning to knock. He was planning to walk in and make it wake up. It started with a headline: "Leaked Records. Isaiah Blake, under past investigation for domestic abuse." No source, no byline, just a flashing banner from a shadowy news site no one had ever heard of. And yet within an hour it was everywhere. Isaiah the abuser, our justice. Or performance. Avery deserved better. The tide shifted fast. The same people who had once held candles were now whispering doubts in comment sections and side conversations. Some didn't believe it. Some did. Most weren't sure what to think. Even Dante Hill, who had fought to keep the truth alive, looked shaken when he called Marcus. "They're good at this," he said quietly. "Real good. They've done it before." Marcus was already digging. "It's too neat, too perfect. Someone planted this." But the damage was done. By the time the story hit cable news, Avery had seen it. From her hospital bed, her thumb trembled as she scrolled through the headlines. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared. When Isaiah entered the room, the air between them felt colder, like the truth itself had started to rot. "Did you know this was coming?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His silence wasn't guilt. It was grief. Not just at the lie, but at how fast people wanted it to be true. Avery looked down at her swollen belly, the bandages wrapped tight across her side. "They want to erase what he did to me by turning you into the monster," she whispered. Still, Isaiah said nothing. He just stood there, jaw-tight, eyes red but dry. The next morning, she asked for her phone. Everyone expected her to stay quiet, to let the lawyers and activists handle it. But Avery was done waiting. At 9:02 a.m., she posted a video. No makeup, no filters, no music. Just a tired, bruised woman in a hospital gown looking straight into the lens. "My name is Avery Blake, and I'm here to say one thing. Isaiah Blake has never laid a violent hand on me. Not once. He protected me when I was at my worst. He held me through the loss of our first child. He kissed my stomach every night of this pregnancy and said our daughter's name like it was sacred. And now you want to erase all of that because one man with a badge wants to avoid prison." She took a long breath. "This isn't just about Isaiah. It's about every woman whose truth gets hijacked by lies." The video hit 1 million views before lunch. That same evening, another live stream popped up. It was Grace Lynn. Her voice cracked before she even spoke. "I was 22. He was a cop. I was walking home and I crossed the street too slow for his liking. He slammed me into a wall and called me another import who doesn't belong. I didn't even tell my mother. I was scared." She paused, tears streaming. "I watched what happened to Avery, and I realized if I keep quiet now, I'm part of it." She reached behind her and held up a photograph. It was her in 2017, bruises still fading. The internet turned again. This time with rage. Rosa Clay called Marcus that night. "This is no longer a trial. This is a movement." But Marcus wasn't celebrating. He was staring at his laptop, zoomed in on the metadata of the so-called leaked file. Then he smiled. Got it. The next morning, he walked into Isaiah's apartment with a printed sheet in his hand. The document they leaked, created 5 days ago, time-stamped at 2:13 p.m., on a department computer inside the 12th precinct. Isaiah took the paper slowly. They forged an entire case, fabricated, and badly if you know what to look for. "Why now?" Marcus looked at him. "Because you're winning." Isaiah finally let out a breath. A long one, like a man who'd been holding his lungs underwater for too long. Then it's time to hit back. But this time he didn't mean with fists. He meant with truth, with records, with testimony, with every person Huxley ever hurt, and every silence the system bought. And maybe, just maybe, with a courtroom full of people who were finally ready to listen. The press conference was quiet for half a breath until Isaiah Blake stepped up to the podium. Behind him stood Rosa Clay, Marcus, Grace Lynn, and 3 women holding framed photos of loved ones lost to police brutality. Isaiah looked out at the reporters, then past them at the dozens of protesters holding candle signs and tears. "We're not here to beg. We're here to build," he said calmly. "And today we're introducing the Avery Act." Rosa leaned into the mic, her voice low but deliberate. "This bill will propose 3 things. 1, a civilian review board with full subpoena power. 2. All body cam footage must be released within 48 hours of an incident involving injury or death. And 3. Any officer with more than one confirmed excessive force complaint loses their qualified immunity permanently. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. One reporter stood up. Do you really think this has a chance of passing? Isaiah didn't flinch. It doesn't need a chance. It needs a conscience. Within 24 hours, the online petition had over 200,000 signatures. By day 3, it passed 500,000. TikTok, Instagram, and X were flooded with the hashtag #JusticeForAvery, and people began sharing their own stories. Not just Black folks, Asian, Latino, Indigenous voices rose up too. One woman from Tulsa wrote, "They called me a mistake in the system, but I wasn't. I was just invisible." Rosa sat with Grace Lynn late that night, looking over the growing archive of testimonials pouring in. "We started a spark," Grace whispered. "Now we just need to keep it from being smothered." But not everyone was celebrating. At City Hall, Mayor Amanda Harper was pacing in her office reading briefing papers as her aides debated in hushed tones. The police union had already issued a statement calling the bill an attack on those who risk their lives daily. Harper slammed her folder closed. "Call Isaiah. We need to schedule a meeting. We can't let this go off the rails." When they met the next morning, Harper tried to stay composed. "You're making waves, Isaiah. But rushing policy through emotion is dangerous." He stared at her, tired but resolute. "You mean dangerous for who?" Harper softened. "You're grieving. You're angry. I understand that." "No, you don't," Isaiah cut in. "Because if you did, you'd stop waiting for this to fade and start standing beside us." She looked at him, struggling to find a diplomatic tone. "If we delay the vote, we can form a task force, evaluate." "No," he said. "You're not evaluating justice. You're postponing it. This isn't a discussion anymore." He stood, placing a folder on her desk. Inside were 23 affidavits from citizens across the city, each accusing Officer Wade Huxley of misconduct, each one swept under the rug. "You're either signing your name to this, or history will remember that you didn't." That night, Isaiah received an email from a woman in Vermont. She wrote, "I've never been political, but I signed the petition because my daughter, she's 5, asked me, 'Mommy, why did the policeman hurt that lady's baby?' And I didn't have an answer. Please don't stop." The next morning, Isaiah met Rosa and Marcus over coffee. None of them looked like they'd slept. "We're not asking for change anymore," Isaiah said quietly. "We're making it." And for the first time in weeks, Marcus cracked a tired smile. "Then let's go loud." You could hear a pin drop in that courtroom. The walls seemed to tighten with every breath. Reporters lined the back. Rows of community members squeezed shoulder to shoulder, many wearing shirts with the words, "Justice for Avery." Even the guards stood still, hands tight on their belts, not out of readiness, but unease. At the front, the screen flickered on. No one introduced it. No one narrated. It was the video. Elijah's phone footage, raw and unfiltered, filled the screen. Avery walking slowly down the sidewalk, her hand cradling her stomach. Officer Wade Huxley barking something off-screen. Avery turning lips, moving, "I'm pregnant." Then, without warning, Huxley's boot slammed into her belly. The sound had been muted, but gasps broke across the room like thunder. Someone sobbed softly in the back. The judge didn't say a word. He let it play again, once, then twice, then a third time. Each time the silence grew heavier. When it ended, the prosecution stood. "We call Elijah Porter to the stand." The boy walked forward, just 8 years old. His feet barely touched the floor when he sat. "Do you know why you're here today, Elijah?" He nodded slowly. "To tell the truth about what I saw." "Can you tell the court what you saw that day?" Elijah looked over at Avery, then down at his hands. She was just walking. She looked tired. She smiled at me, and then he yelled at her. He paused. She said she was pregnant. I heard it. I heard it clear. And then Elijah blinked hard, swallowing. Then he kicked her, like she wasn't even a person. A murmur rolled through the room. The defense attorney stood gently. "Elijah, has anyone told you what to say today?" The boy frowned. "No, I saw it. I filmed it." He turned slightly toward the jury. I used to think police were good, like heroes. His voice broke. I don't know anymore. Avery was next. She walked slowly, her limp still visible, but her spine was straight. Every step echoed. On the stand, she looked directly at Wade Huxley. I told him. I begged him. I looked him in the eyes and said, I'm pregnant. And did he respond? Not with words, with his boot. Her voice trembled, but she didn't cry. I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I didn't know if my baby was alive. I thought... She paused. I thought I'd died too. In the gallery, several people wiped tears. One juror turned away, hand to his mouth. Then came Grace Lynn. She wasn't polished. She didn't try to be. He did the same to me in 2017. I had just come off a night shift. I didn't hear his order fast enough. He threw me on the pavement. My wrist shattered. Why didn't you report it? Grace looked straight at the jury. Because the system isn't built to believe people like me, especially not against men like him. She held up a photo, her x-ray, her bruised face. Seeing Avery woke up something I buried. One juror, an older white man in a pressed shirt, Harold Grant, shifted in his seat. He was a former officer. Everyone in town knew it. The defense had assumed he'd be sympathetic. But he watched Grace stone still. Later, during a break, Harold sat alone in the jury room, staring at the printed statements in front of him. His hand hovered over the paper like it was burning him. One sentence stood out, circled in red. The officer claimed she was non-compliant. He closed his eyes. Back in court, the defense tried its best. They said Huxley acted in fear. They blamed Avery's posture. They brought up policies, statistics, uncertainty. But the room wasn't hearing excuses anymore. They were feeling something else, truth. Raw. Undeniable. When the prosecution gave its closing statement, Isaiah sat beside Avery, hands clasped tight. No press photos, no sound bites, just breath and hope. This isn't about hating police, the attorney said. It's about loving justice more than comfort, believing that no badge excuses brutality, that no uniform justifies silence. He turned to the jury. That baby still has a heartbeat, and so does this city. What you choose now defines both. The room didn't erupt. It didn't cheer. It simply held its breath. The trial wasn't over yet. But something had shifted. Even the silence felt louder than ever before. It took them 9 hours. 9 hours of deliberation. The city held its breath the entire time outside the courthouse, in living rooms across the country, in hospitals and barber shops, in places where people had long learned not to expect justice, but still hoped. When the jury finally returned, there was no cheering, just a hush. Even the air felt still. Avery gripped Isaiah's hand. He didn't squeeze back. He just stared ahead, jaw set, breathing slow. The judge looked down at the verdict form. In the matter of the state versus Wade Huxley, on the charge of aggravated assault on a pregnant woman, the judge paused. We find the defendant guilty. There was a collective gasp, sharp but soft. A ripple, not a roar. The kind of sound a city makes when it realizes something impossible just happened. Sentencing will proceed immediately. Wade Huxley didn't flinch. He just blinked slowly, like he'd been expecting it, and didn't believe it at the same time. The prosecutor stood. We recommend the maximum sentence under statute. The judge nodded once. Firm. No theatrics. 12 years. Effective immediately. Avery didn't cry. Isaiah didn't move. He just leaned in, pressed his forehead against hers, and whispered, We didn't win. We endured. Outside, the world didn't explode. It held still again before beginning to move in a different way. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions no one answered. Protest signs were lowered. Candles relit prayers whispered under breath. In the crowd, someone sobbed and said, "She lived, and so did the truth." The very next morning, Mayor Harper held a press conference on the courthouse steps. The city seal gleamed behind her, but she didn't wear her usual smile. This time, her voice was steady. "Real. Today, I signed into law the Avery Act." She held up the signed legislation. "This is not just a response. It is a beginning. A new contract between the people and those sworn to protect them." Cameras zoomed in on the signature. Rosa Clay stood beside her, arms crossed. Marcus just nodded once. But it was Harold Grant who truly stunned the press. The former officer, the juror who had once worn the same badge as the man he helped convict, stepped up to the microphones. His tie was crooked. His voice a little hoarse. But his words cut through everything. "I wore a badge for 27 years. I trained rookies. I believed in the system. But when I saw that video, and I heard that child's voice, I realized the truth doesn't wear a uniform." He looked down, then back at the crowd. "For the first time, I didn't side with the badge. I sided with the truth." That line, "I sided with the truth," spread like wildfire. It was quoted in op-eds, printed on posters, painted on murals across neighborhoods once ignored. Schools brought Harold in to speak. Some booed him, others stood and clapped. But no one stayed silent. As for Isaiah and Avery, they didn't give interviews. They didn't pose for cameras. They didn't write books or sign deals. They just went home. Isaiah spent his mornings tending to a garden Avery had planted years ago and forgotten. Avery sat by the nursery window holding the tiny hat from the hospital and staring out at the sky. Their daughter had made it, not because the system worked, but because they hadn't given up. 3 days later, Elijah came by with his mother. He handed Isaiah a drawing. It was crude, drawn in crayon, but powerful. A tiny girl holding a flower. Behind her stood Avery. Behind Avery stood Isaiah, and above them, written in shaky little letters, "You protected her." Isaiah looked down at the drawing for a long time. Then he framed it. Did the city change overnight? No. But something had shifted, and no one could pretend otherwise anymore. Because when a city watches a courtroom fall silent, and then hears the verdict echo louder than any protest, that city doesn't forget. 1 year later, it wasn't loud anymore. The protests had faded. The headlines moved on, but something deeper had taken root. Change had stopped shouting. It had started building. Avery stood in front of a modest brick building on the south side, holding the keys in her palm like they were made of glass. A new sign hung above the door, the Avery House, Maternity Support Center for Black Mothers. Inside, the walls were warm, lined with soft lighting and photos of smiling families. Nurses bustled around quietly. There were bassinets, safe spaces, doulas on call, and a room just for rest. She hadn't wanted her name on the building, but people insisted. Not because she was a symbol, but because she had survived and refused to let others suffer in silence. Across town, Isaiah stood behind a different podium. The banner read, "The Blake Institute for Accountability." It wasn't a protest group. It wasn't political. It was relentless. A watchdog organization, independent and publicly funded, made to hold every badge and uniform to the standard the law claimed to honor. Isaiah didn't smile much anymore, but he spoke, calm, firm, measured. "We're not here to tear it down. We're here to shine a light bright enough that no one can pretend not to see." And they were seeing, because across the country policies were shifting, cities were watching their own. Departments were turning inward, some resisting others, reckoning. Grace Lynn stood before a city council in Chicago, her voice clear. "You can't scare me into silence again. I know who I am now." The chamber echoed as the vote passed, unanimous. Grace became the city's first independent police oversight commissioner. The woman once shamed into silence was now the one asking the questions, and answering none. As for Elijah, The boy who held a camera steadier than some grown men, he didn't just become a symbol. He became a student. At a quiet ceremony under an old oak tree, Isaiah handed him an envelope. Inside, the very first Justice Scholar grant. You didn't just witness history, Isaiah told him. You helped write it. Elijah blinked up at him, then asked the only question that mattered. Can I help others do that too? Isaiah smiled for the first time in weeks. That's the point. And then there was the final moment. The moment no one scripted, but everyone remembered. A warm evening, an outdoor event under soft lights. People gathered on folding chairs, a string quartet playing faintly in the background. On stage, a tiny girl barely walking stepped toward a miniature microphone. Her name was Justice. She toddled forward in a white dress, gripping her father's finger, her steps wobbly but certain. The crowd stood. No one clapped, no one cheered. Just silence. That kind of silence that says, we know what this means. Isaiah knelt beside her, looked out at the crowd, spoke into the mic. Justice doesn't arrive all at once. He looked at his daughter. It learns to walk. The music returned, soft swelling. People held hands. Some cried. Others just closed their eyes and let it settle in. It wasn't the end. It never would be. But for the first time in a long time, people believed. Justice had taken its first steps. Justice doesn't walk alone. Today, you saw how courage, truth, and love can challenge even the most broken systems. This wasn't just about Isaiah or Avery. It was about every voice that refuses to be silenced. Every step forward, no matter how small, leaves a path for someone else. So if this story made you feel something like it did for us, please tap that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and hit subscribe to follow more powerful stories, just like this one on Mr. Max Stories. Your support isn't just numbers, it's fuel. It tells us, keep going. Keep telling the stories that matter. Here at Mr. Max Stories, we don't just tell tales. We remember the ones the world tries to forget. See you in the next one.